read John chapter 4. The last section is starting at verse 46. So Jesus had been down in Judea, had been in Jerusalem, and then through Samaria he stopped at the well in Sychar and had a little conversation with the woman at the well. And now verse 46. Once more he visited Cana in Galilee, where he had turned the water into wine. And there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son, who was close to death. Unless you people see signs and wonders, Jesus told him, you will never believe. The royal official said, Sir, come down before my child dies. Go, Jesus replied, your son will live. The man took Jesus at his word and departed. While he was still on the way, his servants met him with the news that his boy was living. When he inquired as to the time when his son got better, they said, yesterday, at 1 in the afternoon, the fever left him. Then the father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, your son will live. So he and his whole household believed. This was the second sign Jesus performed after coming from Judea to Galilee. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Dearly loved people of God. So John's Gospel, after bringing us all the way south to Jerusalem and through Samaria, now brings us back north to Galilee, to the town of Cana. And in case you missed the earlier events of the Gospel, the author is quick to remind you that Cana was the place where Jesus had blessed a wedding party. He blessed a wedding party with 600, maybe 700 liters of wine. And when John recorded those events back in chapter 2 of his Gospel, he made a point of saying that was Jesus' first miracle, his first miraculous sign. The extravagant amount of wine that Jesus had produced for that wedding was a sign that God was on the move. It was a sign that the great and dreadful day of the Lord was dawning. It was the day that the Old Testament prophets had pointed ahead to. Joel and Amos both talked about it. That day when the mountain would drip with new wine and the hills overflow with milk. All the ravines of Judah would run with water. A fountain would flow out of the Lord's house and water the valley of Acacias. All that stuff had happened here in this town. And now in today's reading, Jesus returns to Cana. And his actions while he's there are what John calls the second sign. And yet, before providing the second sign, Jesus betrays some frustration. The Jewish people are so focused on his signs and on his wonders that they pay no attention to the things that they signify. The Jewish people that are watching Jesus can't see the forest because of the trees. But this royal official who comes, he's a little different than the others. How is he different, you might ask? Well, first of all, he's an outsider. He's appointed to take care of King Herod's affairs in Capernaum, in Galilee. But this royal official looks at Jesus and sees his wonder signs a little bit differently than everybody else. Prompted by his love for his son, this royal official asks Jesus to give his son life. This royal official isn't looking for a thrill or for a story to tell other people. He's looking for life for his son. He's looking for help. Let's back up a second here. Jesus has come back to Galilee. He's back in his home province. He's back in the neighborhood where he grew up. Cana is just across the valley from the town of Nazareth, where Jesus and his folks came from. And so Jesus knows this territory. He has friends and relatives all over the place here. He might even be visiting the newlyweds and sipping a cup of leftover wine from their wedding still. Enter the royal official. Galilee is ruled by King Herod. This royal household, and perhaps even this royal official, weren't even Jewish. This royal official isn't loyal to the Galileans. His loyalty is all to Herod and to that kingdom, to that royal house. And so this is somebody who's not your typical Galilean Jew. But his son is sick. His son is so sick with his fever that he's close to death. Now most parents would go wherever it took to find some sort of healing to prevent their child from dying. They would go wherever they needed to and do whatever it took to save their child from illness, from death. Completely desperate, this royal official travels from Capernaum to Cana and begs Jesus, "Come and heal my son." He has faith that Jesus has the ability, has the power to heal his son. And he's not even put off by Jesus' comment. "Unless you people see signs and wonders," Jesus told him, "you'll never believe." This father only has a concern for his sick son. He urges Jesus all the more urgently, "Come down to the coast before my child dies." But Jesus doesn't go with him. Jesus doesn't go down to the coast. I'm sure there was some disappointment in this royal official when Jesus sent him away. It's not the way he had pictured this miraculous sign when he had been traveling uphill all the way from the seacoast to the hill country of Cana. What did he imagine, do you think? You think he was looking for the day when Jesus would enter his hometown, enter his home, would come into that room where his sick child was, maybe touch the child, maybe say some amazing words over the child, and then a cloud of smoke and the child would be well? Maybe he was imagining a prayer of great power. You think maybe there's a little letdown at Jesus' words? "Go," Jesus said. "Your son will live." Nothing spectacular, was it? To walk away at that moment, to follow Jesus' instructions and go, must have been a hard thing to do, don't you think? He has no certainty that anything has happened at all. They just heard Jesus say some words. And that's all he had to hang on to, wasn't it? Just those words. That Jesus had given this father the word that his child would live. And whether he was traveling by foot or on a camel or a horse or something, every step that he took, he wrestled with those thoughts. Perhaps doubts. Perhaps misgivings. And yet every time that they started to overwhelm him, he could turn back and say, but Jesus said that my son would live. That journey from Cana to Capernaum is where we live in our faith as people who believe in Jesus Christ. That journey with only Jesus' word to hang on to is exactly where we live. We live by faith, not by sight. And that is not easy. Sometime on that journey of life, there's doubts and misgivings. What do you have to hang on to after all when those doubts start to grow? When the misgivings threaten to drown your faith, to drown your hope? Like this dad on his way home, the only thing you have to hold on to is Jesus' word. And yet Jesus' word is the trump card. The trump card over all the doubts, over all the misgivings, over all the whispers of the evil one. The whole next chapter is about Jesus' authority to speak words of life. To speak words of life to a world that's troubled by illness, troubled by lameness, that's troubled by crippling doubts. I encourage you to read through John chapter 5 in this week ahead. If you want a guide, there's one available at the door that goes through this chapter bit by bit throughout the week. For in chapter 5, Jesus speaks as God the Son. And his words in chapter 5 leave no doubt that he has the authority to say the word and people will live. This is what he says in chapter 5, verse 24. Very truly I tell you, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but has crossed over from death to life. Have you heard this word of life? Do you trust it? Is this what you hang on to in the dark nights or worrisome days? This morning we get to come to the Lord's Supper table. And at that table, Jesus' assurances become even more tangible than his word alone. Along with his word, we have the bread and the cup. The bread and the cup are reminders, tangible ways of us feeling and experiencing Jesus' words of life. The reminder that Jesus isn't just talk. Jesus has intervened powerfully to rescue us from death, from judgment. He has rescued us from death to give us life. You see, our first parents long ago were told that if they disobeyed God and ate the fruit, that they would die. You know the story, perhaps. They did eat that fruit. And they ushered death into the world. Their disobedience passed that death sentence on to each generation of their offspring. So that daily we also persist in our disobedience. We don't live up to God's standard of truth, to God's standard of grace. Not even with our closest friends and relatives do we live up to that standard. And the theological term for that is sin. And the punishment for sin is death. That's the doom that hangs over each and every one of us. Except that Jesus came with grace and with truth, enough for all people. So God the Father sent God the Son into the world as a human being to bring grace, to bring truth. Healing this royal official's son is a sign that Jesus' word gives life. It's a sign that Jesus' word gives life. That's what we hang on to as we come to the Lord's Supper table and eat the bread and drink the cup. That we have tangible reminders of the way that Jesus put his word into action. The bread is Jesus' body. It's a sign and seal that the suffering Jesus endured on the cross took the full punishment for your sin. The disobedience of humankind was put on Jesus. He died on the cross so that you could live. And then the cup is the blood of the covenant. It's the sign and seal that no more sacrifices are needed. No more sheep or goats or doves or bulls need to be slaughtered to cover over human sin. And the cup's a reminder that Jesus' blood has covered over our guilt and our sin. Because of Jesus, you can be clean. You can be pure. You can be holy as if you'd never sinned or been a sinner. You have Jesus' word on it. But there's even more. The cup and the bread point ahead to the day when our faith will become sight. The cup is the assurance that one day we'll participate in a great family reunion, a great feast. Maybe you've gotten together with family or friends over the holidays and put on a big spread. That ain't nothing compared to what's going on. When you sit at table with generation after generation after generation of God's dearly loved people, shoulder to shoulder with the heroes of faith in the Bible, with Jesus at the head of this table. with God himself. When you break bread that day, you have the experience in fullness that your sin and guilt are lifted. This bread, this cup point to that day and give the assurance now already that you've been cleansed from sin and guilt. And the day is coming, that great and dreadful day of the Lord, when all the ills and brokenness of God's creation are going to be done away with, and all things will be set straight. And so our celebration of the Lord's Supper this morning is a little bit like that meeting on the road that we read about in John chapter 4. You remember how that royal official headed home when Jesus told him, "Go, your son will live." And probably just repeating those words over and over again to himself. My son will live, my son will live. Jesus said, my son will live. And then part of the way home, he met his servants coming the other direction looking for him. They came with the exciting word, your son is going to live. The fever broke yesterday about 1 p.m. He's going to live. Everything is well again. And as they compared notes, they realized that his son's fever broke at the exact time when Jesus had said, your son will live. Coincidence? This dad doesn't think so. Then and there, he and his whole household believed that Jesus' word is true, that Jesus himself is the truth, that they would live because of Jesus. Not just his son, but the whole household. At this point, the royal official still had not seen his son alive and running around the way that little kids do. Last time he'd seen him, he was still sick. Here's his dad, not yet in Capernaum, not yet in his own household, not yet holding his little one in his arms, but trusting Jesus' word and trusting the word of his servants that his son was alive and well. And I think that is John's point in telling this whole account of this royal official and his son who lived. John is writing this gospel for people who hadn't been born yet when this miracle took place. They had not seen any of Jesus' miraculous signs. John was writing for people like you, people who have to take John's word that all these things are true. Have to take John's word that Jesus said and did all these things. And we're on that journey, aren't we? We've heard Jesus' assurances of life. And here at the Lord's Supper table, we're given further assurances of our eternal home. And we're invited, called, challenged to take Jesus at his word, to hold on to that assurance and hope that Jesus has given us, that we will live. In Jesus' own words, very truly I tell you, and if you know anything about Hebrew, he says, Amen, Amen. What does Amen mean? Anybody remember what Amen means? That means this is true. You can take this stuff to the bank. And Jesus says it twice. This is true. This is true. Listen. Whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but has crossed over from death to life. Do you believe it? Can you believe it? It sounds almost too good to be true. But you have Jesus' word on it. And today, as we come to the Lord's table, we get that word even more tangibly. As we eat and we drink, and the word goes through our head again and again. Those who believe in Jesus, who hear his word and believe in him, have eternal life. They will not face judgment for sin or guilt. They've crossed over from death to life. This is your story. This is our experience. And it's true. Amen.